Millionaire CEO goes to a winter gala alone and sees his ex-wife with 4 boys who look exactly like him. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Now enjoy the story. The Grand Sterling Hotel shimmered in winter's embrace, its glass facade catching the falling snow like diamonds on silk. Inside, the ballroom buzzed with curated elegance. Tuxedos and sequins whispered deals over champagne flutes and the soft clink of silver against porcelain. A charity gala in name only. In truth, it was the kind of evening where fortunes danced in shadows and reputations were polished beneath crystal chandeliers. Wyatt Carter stood near the towering centerpiece of frosted roses, his presence magnetic, yet solitary. At 43, the CEO of Monroe Systems had built an empire with sharp instincts and sharper solitude. He wore his custom midnight blue tuxedo like armor, his cufflinks discreetly inscribed with the company's initials. But tonight, his mind wandered elsewhere, anywhere but the echo of polite small talk. Shame Harper couldn't make it said. Walter Simmons, the silver-haired chairman of his board, swirling a glass of aged Scotch last-minute migraine. Wyatt replied smoothly. A rehearsed lie. Harper's absence had been no accident. Lately, her jealousy had turned every public event into a cross-examination. He turned from the conversation, reaching absently for a glass of champagne from a passing tray, when time quite suddenly forgot how to move. Across the ballroom, just past the ice sculpture of an eagle, mid-flight stood a woman in a navy blue dress, understated and glowing like a memory that refused to fade. Tessa. Morgan Wyatt's fingers froze in midair. 3 years had passed since their marriage dissolved in a storm of silence and boardroom ambition, but there she was, graceful. Unadorned, her auburn hair curled in soft waves over her shoulder, and at her feet, 4 small boys. Not just boys, copies. 4 tiny faces carbon-copied from his own reflection, same sharp cheekbones, same gray eyes, the same unmistakable cleft in the chin, a signature Carter feature that couldn't be faked. His heartbeat stumbled. The champagne flute went untouched. Wyatt. "Are you okay?" Walter's voice was distant, muffled like a radio in another room. He didn't answer. Couldn't. The world had narrowed to 5 figures on the far side of the ballroom. 1 woman he used to love, and 4 boys he had never seen yet somehow. Already knew. He took a step forward as if pulled by a string. Then another. And another. Tessa looked up and saw him. Her face was drained of color. She whispered something to the boys. They turned in unison. 4 pairs of gray eyes blinked back at him. 1 boy leaned close to his mother. "Mom, who's that man?" Another pointed. "He looks like us." Wyatt Carter, master of mergers and multi-billion-dollar deals, felt the floor shift beneath him. Not from vertigo, but from the quiet thunder of something he had never planned for. He had not come to this gala to reclaim a family, but fate had arrived in the form of 4 little boys. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. Wyatt barely registered the whispers or the curious glances as he crossed the ballroom floor. The orchestra's string quartet played on, blissfully unaware that his entire world had just shattered and reassembled itself in a new, incomprehensible shape. Tessa stood still, her spine straight, her expression unreadable, but her eyes gave her away. There was fear there, and guilt, and something else. Something raw. He stopped just a few feet from her, suddenly unsure of what to say, what to ask, how to breathe. "Tessa," he said at last, his voice hoarse with restraint. "I think we need to talk." She nodded, hands instinctively, resting on the shoulders of the 2 boys closest to her. "I wondered when this day would come." She murmured, "Are they?" His voice faltered. The answer was already written across each of their small, serious faces. Still, he needed to hear it. "Yes," she said simply. "This is Landon, Levi, Finn, and Dylan," one of the boys. Levi perhaps peeked out from behind her skirt, eyes wide and curious. Another, bolder and wearing a tiny blue blazer, stepped forward slightly, never breaking eye contact with Wyatt. Which one said I looked like him? Wyatt asked, managing a faint smile. The boys all looked at one another. I did, said Landon, lifting his chin with the confidence of a boy who already knew he was the oldest, even if only by minutes. A flicker of pride flashed through Wyatt, quickly followed by a tidal wave of confusion, awe, and ache. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, voice low. Tessa's gaze didn't waver. I tried. After the divorce, I called your office 17 times, left messages, I sent letters certified. Even Wyatt's brow furrowed. I never received anything. I believe you, she said, though there was a slight tremor in her voice. Your assistant at the time, Harper. He realized, his stomach nodding. I don't know if it was her. Tessa added quickly. I just know nothing ever reached you. And after a year, I stopped trying. The weight of 5 years descended on him like concrete. He turned to the boys again, drinking them in. So similar, yet subtly different. Tessa gestured gently as she introduced them. Landon's in blue. He's our brave one. Levi's in green. He builds things out of anything he can find. Finn in gray is the quiet one. He draws a lot, and Dylan in red. She trailed off, smiling softly. Dylan doesn't walk. He bounces as if summoned. Dylan spun in a full circle, arms out like airplane wings. Wyatt let out a short, amazed laugh, then looked at her again, the humor fading. Tessa, I would have helped. I would have been there. Would you? She asked softly, but not unkindly. You were building an empire, Wyatt, and I was just tired. Tired of coming second to a stock price. He swallowed hard. A nearby camera flashed some opportunist snapping photos of what surely looked like a high society scandal in the making. Wyatt barely noticed. His focus remained on the 4 boys now watching him like curious, mirrored reflections. Then he felt it. A tremor at the edge of the room, Harper. He turned just in time to see her enter. Dressed in crimson, cutting through the crowd like a blade, Tessa saw her too. You need to decide, she said quickly. This can't become a spectacle. Not for them. He nodded, glancing once more at the boys. I'm not letting them go, he said quietly. Not again. Tessa didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. Worry, hope, and something that looked a little like belief. Then Dylan tugged at her dress. Mom, he said, pointing at Wyatt, is he coming with us? The question floated in the air, fragile and holy. Wyatt didn't answer. But in that moment, he knew his life had just split into 2. The man he had been and the father he had to become. Wyatt barely had time to step aside before Harper reached them, her heels echoing like distant warning bells against the marble floor. She moved with purpose, her crimson dress hugging her frame, her expression already twisted into something between curiosity and calculation. Her gaze swept across the scene, the 4 boys, the familiar woman Wyatt caught like a statue in the middle and froze on Tessa's face. Then her eyes dropped to the boys. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 identical faces. Her mouth parted, but no sound came. The reality hit her like glass cracking beneath high pressure. Wyatt stepped between them instinctively. Harper, he said in a low voice. Not here. Not now. But she wasn't looking at him anymore. Who are they? She asked sharply, though the answer was plain. Before Wyatt could respond, Landon stepped forward, lifting his chin like a small general defending his troops. I'm Landon Carter, he said, clear and confident. These are my brothers Carter, Harper repeated, blinking. As in yes, Tessa said firmly, stepping beside her son. They carry their father's name. The blood drained from Harper's face. You never told me you had children, she whispered to Wyatt. I didn't know, he said simply, until 5 minutes ago. Her lips parted again. Perhaps to argue, perhaps to accuse, but no words came. She turned slightly, realizing that people were watching now. Conversations had slowed. Phones were being discreetly raised. Wyatt's instincts kicked in. We need to go, he said to Tessa. All of us. She hesitated but nodded. Come on, boys, she said gently. Let's get some fresh air. As the children followed a nearby server toward the dessert tables, eyes wide at the promise of chocolate fountains and marshmallow skewers, Harper stepped in close. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You've just embarrassed me in front of the entire board. In front of the city. I didn't plan this," he said coldly. "But I'm not ashamed of them or her." Her eyes narrowed. "You're going to throw away everything we've built over this?" Wyatt turned toward the alcove where his sons were now laughing near the ice sculpture, their suits slightly askew, their faces glowing. "I never built anything real with you, Harper," he said. "Not like this." She didn't respond. Just stood there, heels glued to the floor, fury shimmering beneath her perfect skin. Tessa returned, ushering the boys back toward him. They were each holding a plate of sweets, sticky fingers, and powdered sugar smiles. Dylan handed Wyatt a chocolate-covered strawberry. "You should try this," he said. "It's magic." Wyatt crouched to eye level, accepting the fruit. "Thank you, Dylan. You remembered my name." The boy beamed. "I remember all your names," he said softly, glancing at the others. "How could I forget?" Tessa's voice lowered beside him. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. "I wasn't ready when I had everything. Maybe this is what I needed to remind me what actually matters." Just then, his phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Wyatt opened it. It was a photo of him crouched beside the boys, Tessa just behind them. The caption read, "Tech mogul's secret family. How much is this image worth?" The threat was clear. Wyatt stared at the screen, jaw tightening. Someone was watching. Someone intended to turn his sons into a headline. Tessa saw the change in his face. "What is it?" she asked. He showed her the phone. Her breath caught. "They can't be part of this," she said urgently, her arms instinctively reaching for the boys. "They don't deserve it." Wyatt stood, shoulders squaring. "No," he said. "They don't." Then turning to Tessa, his voice softened. "I need your address. I'm sending my head of security over tonight. You think it's that serious? I know it is," he said. "And I'm not losing them. Not again. Not to anyone." The drive across the city was quiet. Wyatt sat beside Tessa in the back seat of his town car, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. The boys sat in the third row behind them, happily recounting the chocolate buffet and debating whether or not the ice sculpture was actually made of real ice. "Mr. Carter, the security team is already at the address," came Omar Steele's voice over the intercom. "We're sweeping the building and setting up a watch." "Thank you," Wyatt said, eyes still fixed on the reflection of 4 small heads bobbing in the rearview mirror. When they arrived at the apartment, Wyatt hesitated before stepping inside. It was modest, lived in and warm in a way his penthouse had never been. A blanket draped over the back of a couch, children's drawings taped unevenly along the hallway, the faint scent of cinnamon and something home-cooked lingering in the air. Tessa moved with practiced grace through the chaos-gathering shoes, guiding the boys toward the hallway. "Come on, bedtime routine," she called. "You've all had enough sugar to power a small village." The boys groaned in harmony but obeyed. As they disappeared into their shared room, Tessa turned to Wyatt. "They know you're staying for a bit," she said. "I didn't promise more." "That's fair." She led him toward the kitchen where he took in the everyday clutter. Cereal boxes, a stack of bills, a calendar pinned with stickers marking school events and doctor appointments. "Do you want something to drink?" she asked. "No." He said, "I want to know them." Tessa's expression softened. "Then start by asking them yourself." She stepped away and Wyatt stood alone for a long moment before walking toward the boys' room. The door was ajar and he knocked lightly before peeking in. Inside were 2 bunk beds, a floor littered with building blocks and superhero socks, and 4 boys in various stages of pajamas. Landon looked up first. "You came in?" he said like it was a surprise. "I wanted to say goodnight." Levi, in green pajamas dotted with rocket ships, sat cross-legged on his bed. "You can help me fix my robot tomorrow?" he asked. "I'd like that," Wyatt said, voice steady. Dylan bounced on his mattress like a spring, half a toothbrush in his mouth. Do you have robots at your work? I have something better, Wyatt replied with a small grin. People who build them? Finn, the quietest, said nothing, but he looked at Wyatt, eyes deep and unreadable, then carefully held out a drawing. It was a simple sketch. 5 stick figures holding hands. 4 small ones. 1 tall. Wyatt's throat closed. "Thank you," he whispered. Finn gave the faintest nod, then turned to the wall and clicked off his reading light. Tessa stood behind him now, watching silently. "You didn't have to come," she said quietly. "But you did." He turned to face her. This is the first thing in a long time that hasn't felt like an obligation." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then from the kitchen, Wyatt's phone buzzed. A message from Benjamin Lawton. "We traced the blackmail. Likely someone linked to Orion Dynamics. Kingston's fingerprints are all over it." Wyatt exhaled slowly. The war was starting, but this time he wasn't fighting for a company, he was fighting for his sons. By the time dawn tinted the Manhattan skyline in pale silver, Wyatt's penthouse was no longer just a residence. It had become a war room. Omar Steele, head of security, stood beside the towering windows, reviewing surveillance feeds on his tablet. Across from him, Benjamin Lawton, Wyatt's longtime attorney, flipped through printed screenshots of the blackmail messages. It wasn't random. Benjamin said, "The angles, the framing. Whoever took those photos at the gala knew exactly what they were doing. Professional quality." Omar added, "But shot on a phone. We're tracking nearby devices that pinged during the event, checking ties to Orion Dynamics." Wyatt stood by the fireplace, arms crossed over his chest. Though he wore a tailored shirt and slacks, he hadn't slept. The image of Finn's drawing those 5 stick figures was still fresh in his mind. "This is Kingston," he said flatly. "Orion's been trying to undermine the Everstream merger for months, scaring the board into thinking. I have liabilities." Classic strategy. Benjamin looked up. "They're not liabilities, Wyatt. They're your children." "I know that." Wyatt's voice sharpened. "That's why this doesn't touch them. We'll handle it quietly, thoroughly, and fast." Before they could discuss further, Wyatt's phone lit up. "Tessa?" He answered immediately. "Is everything okay?" Her voice was low and tense. "There's a man with a camera parked outside the building. I haven't told the boys. They're eating breakfast." Wyatt felt a spike of cold rage. "Stay inside. I'm sending Omar and a driver now. I'll be there myself in 20. As he ended the call, he was already grabbing his coat. "Omar, you're with me." "On it," the man replied, holstering his radio. 22 minutes later, they pulled up in front of Tessa's apartment. Wyatt exited the car before it had fully stopped. Tessa opened the door before he knocked. Relief crossed her face when she saw it was him. 2 plainclothes security agents were already stationed outside, and a third was moving the photographer along under threat of police intervention. Inside, the apartment buzzed with the warmth of a normal morning, bowls of cereal on the table. Crayon drawings scattered across the floor. The sound of little voices arguing over who got to sit by the window. "They're in their room," Tessa said softly. "I told them their father was coming." Wyatt's heartbeat kicked into something slower, heavier. "What did they say?" Landon asked. "What you do all day." "Levi wants to show you his robot. Dylan's been bouncing since 7. And Finn..." She paused. "Finn's been drawing you. All morning." Wyatt stepped past her toward the hallway. The door to the boys' room was covered in sketches. Dragons, rockets, and now stick figures holding hands again. This time with a 5th figure wearing a suit. He knocked gently and opened the door. The chaos paused at the sight of him. Levi looked up from a tangle of wires. "Can you fix this?" "I think so," Wyatt said. Dylan cartwheeled across the carpet in response. "Told you he was smart." Finn offered him a drawing without a word. This one of their apartment, the 5 of them gathered on the worn couch. Above it, a crooked heart. Something caught in Wyatt's throat. Landon studied him carefully. "Are you staying this time?" he asked. It was the question. The one Wyatt had been trying to outrun his whole life. I didn't know about you before he said kneeling, but now that I do, yes, I'm staying. The boy said nothing for a moment, then nodded once like a man sealing a deal. In the living room, Tessa was gathering mugs for coffee. The sound of footsteps and voices came from the hall as Omar and Benjamin arrived with a third guest. Clara, Bishop Wyatt's sharp-eyed executive assistant, her tablet already in hand. The team sat around a table cluttered with superhero action figures and a single half-eaten apple. Kingston has already met with 2 board members, Clara reported. He's implying you've been hiding a family to manipulate stock value. Wyatt paced his jaw tight. He's using my kids to paint me as unstable. Benjamin looked up. We need to control the narrative. No. Tessa interrupted from the kitchen, coffee in hand. You're not using the boys for PR. I won't have them turned into a media shield. Everyone turned to her. She didn't flinch. Wyatt met her eyes and surprised even himself with what he said next. She's right. There was a pause. I won't use them, Wyatt clarified. I'll protect them, but not by hiding. We go quiet for now. We finish what Kingston started, and when the time's right, we speak on our terms. Dylan bolted into the room with a superhero cape trailing behind him. He paused at the sight of the assembled adults. Who are these people? He asked, arms akimbo. Wyatt crouched beside him, smiling. These are your dad's friends, and they're here to help us with a big problem. Dylan considered that, then nodded. Okay, but if they're staying, we're out of juice boxes. Laughter broke the tension. In that moment, amid legal strategy and growing threats, Wyatt Carter realized something profound. He hadn't just inherited 4 sons. He'd inherited a future, and no matter what came next, he would not fail them. The news broke at 5:57 a.m. Wyatt was in a hotel suite just 5 blocks from Tessa's apartment, a temporary crash pad while he looked for a more permanent home near the boys. He'd barely stirred from a restless sleep when his phone began to ring. Turn on Channel 8. Clara said, no greeting, just urgency. Still groggy, he grabbed the remote and flipped on the TV tech. Tycoon Wyatt Carter's secret family of quadruplets revealed. The words hit like a blow. On screen, the anchor's smile was thin and hungry. The headline scrawled across a photo of Wyatt crouching beside Landon, Levi, Dylan, and Finn, all of them mid-laugh, unaware of the camera that had captured them at the gala. Wyatt sat up straighter. His phone buzzed again. Tessa. There are reporters outside my building, she said tightly. The boys are scared. Someone knocked hard. I'm on my way, he said, already pulling on clothes. Downstairs, his driver had to push through a growing scrum of photographers and journalists just to open the car door. Microphones swung like claws. Questions fired off like bullets. Mr. Carter, did you abandon your children? Is this why you broke off your engagement to Harper Lowell? Are you pursuing custody? He ignored them all. Inside Tessa's apartment, the tension was a living thing. The boys sat on the couch in pajamas, huddled together, the TV now silent and black. Connor, no. Landon had clicked it off the moment Wyatt walked in. I told them not to watch, Tessa said quietly. But they saw enough. Wyatt knelt in front of his sons. Hey, he said gently. I know this is scary, but it's going to be okay. Finn looked up, eyes solemn. Why are they saying bad things about Mom? Wyatt's chest tightened. Because sometimes people get excited about stories and forget to be kind, but what they're saying doesn't matter. You know the truth, and that's what counts. Dylan scooted closer, whispering. One lady banged on the door really loud. It made me drop my cereal. I'm sorry, buddy, Wyatt said, pulling him into a hug. No one's going to scare you again. I promise. His phone buzzed again. Benjamin this time. Board's calling an emergency meeting 11 a.m. They're nervous. Of course they were. Stocks had already dipped. Investors didn't like surprises. And quadruplets on the front page of every tabloid in America. That was a storm. Tessa stood at the kitchen island. Arms crossed, her voice low. You should go. I told Landon I'd be at his science presentation today. Wyatt replied. He'll understand, she said, though her voice faltered. Will he? Wyatt asked. The boardroom had always felt like a battlefield to Wyatt, but this morning as he stepped into Monroe Systems headquarters it felt like an interrogation chamber. 12 faces turned toward him, some curious, some concerned, others already judging Walter Simmons. The chairman cleared his throat. Wyatt, while your personal life is your own, the company's reputation, I'm not hiding my sons. Wyatt interrupted. I'm proud of them. A flicker of surprise passed through a few expressions. That wasn't what they'd expected. The markets dropped 3 points. Clara noted from the corner. Always direct. I've faced worse. Wyatt said calmly. And we'll recover again, because I'm not stepping down. I'm restructuring. Murmurs filled the room. I'll be leaving the office by 5 p.m. most days, he continued, delegating late meetings, prioritizing my sons. If anyone sees that as a weakness, they don't know what true leadership looks like. By the end of the meeting, the air had shifted, tense still but not hostile, not entirely. Wyatt left the boardroom without another word and headed straight for the school. He made it just in time. The auditorium was small, packed with folding chairs and proud parents. On stage, Landon stood beside a model solar system made of foam and wire, each planet spinning with the help of a tiny motor. My dad helped me fix it. Landon announced to the class, he knows about engines and chocolate fountains. The other children laughed. Wyatt's throat burned. That night, after the boys had gone to bed, he and Tessa sat on the living room floor surrounded by legal documents and financial reports. This doesn't make sense, she said, scrolling through account activity on her laptop. Recurring transfers, labeled as vendor payments. But they don't match any vendor I've ever seen. Wyatt leaned over her shoulder. Let me guess, every third Tuesday. She nodded. Vanessa Harper. He corrected himself. She was a co-signer. Tessa looked at him, brows raised. That's a lot of trust, or a lot of oversight, he muttered. More evidence mounted, more betrayal uncovered. And somewhere down the hall, one of the boys stirred in his sleep. Wyatt stood following the sound. It was Finn standing in the hallway in dinosaur pajamas clutching a stuffed triceratops. I had a bad dream, the boy said. Wyatt knelt. Do you want to talk about it? There were shadows, Finn whispered, and I couldn't find anyone. Wyatt took his hand. Shadows can't hurt you, they just mean the light's behind them. Finn considered that. Will, you stay until I fall asleep? He asked. Wyatt didn't hesitate. Of course, he sat beside the bed watching the boy's eyes grow heavy. And in that quiet beneath a Batman nightlight and the sound of soft breathing, Wyatt Carter understood something that corporate success had never taught him. This was what legacy really meant. 2 weeks had passed since Wyatt stepped down as CEO of Monroe Systems. The headlines had cooled, investors had calmed, and the world as it does had moved on. But Maxwell Kingston hadn't. At 6:03 a.m., Wyatt's phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. Carter family hiding assets. Anonymous source alleges fraud. The article was everything Kingston had been working toward: carefully leaked accusations, speculation about offshore accounts, and damning photos of the townhouse where Wyatt now spent half his week. There were even thinly veiled suggestions that Tessa had orchestrated the entire reunion to manipulate stock value. Tessa stood at the kitchen sink, her face pale as she read over his shoulder. It's her, she whispered. Harper, feeding him lies. Wyatt didn't respond immediately. He was watching Finn, who stood frozen in the hallway clutching a crumpled newspaper with his father's photo on the front page. Is it my fault? The boy asked, voice almost inaudible. Wyatt crossed the room in 3 strides, knelt and took the paper from his hand. No, he said firmly. None of this is your fault. It's mine for not protecting you sooner. He stood, heart pounding. I need to end this, he said. For good. By noon, Wyatt sat in a private boardroom across from Kingston, who had the smug ease of a man who thought he'd already won. You're here alone. Kingston smirked. I expected lawyers, I brought proof instead. Wyatt replied, sliding a folder across the table. Kingston flipped through it. Bank transfers, audio recordings, photos of secret meetings with Harper. His face slowly drained of color. You recorded us? No, Wyatt said, but the security cameras at her building did. Kingston closed the folder slowly. What do you want? Your silence, your resignation from Orion, and your signature on this. Wyatt slid over a non-disclosure agreement. If you ever mention my sons again, if you so much as breathe in their direction, I will bury you. Kingston leaned back, calculating. You'd walk away from all this. Your company. Your crown. I already did, Wyatt replied. Turns out, I like the view better from a jungle gym than a corner office. Kingston said nothing, but when Wyatt stood and left, he took the NDA with him. It was over. That afternoon, the school auditorium buzzed with activity. Cardboard sets, glitter-covered planets, and rows of folding chairs filled the space. Wyatt slipped in just before the curtains opened. Tessa gave him a questioning look from the second row. You made it? I promised I would. The lights dimmed. The play began. And there, center stage, in a papier-mâché astronaut helmet, stood Landon, arms outstretched. My name is Landon Carter, he said proudly, and this is my solar system. In the back row, Wyatt's phone buzzed again. He turned it off, that moment. The light on his son's face, the chorus of children singing about Mars and Jupiter. The laughter that echoed through the auditorium was more valuable than any deal he'd ever signed. And when Landon pointed to the audience and said, My dad helped me build this, Wyatt knew something unshakable had taken root in him. The world could speculate, the markets could sway, but he had found his orbit, and nothing could pull him away from it again. The real estate agent could hardly contain her excitement as she opened the door to the townhouse. Fully renovated, she said brightly. 4 bedrooms upstairs, a spacious primary suite on the main floor. And best of all, it's just 3 blocks from the elementary school. Wyatt didn't answer right away. He was watching Tessa, who stepped quietly into the sunlit kitchen and ran her fingers along the marble counter. Her brows were furrowed not with doubt, but with thought. They had seen a dozen homes over the past 2 weeks. None of them had made her pause. Until now, backyard. She asked softly. The agent beamed, sliding open a set of glass doors. It's modest but enclosed, safe for children. The yard was small, yes, but beautiful. A patch of soft grass, a few garden beds, and a weathered tree sturdy enough to hang a tire swing from Wyatt. Stepped out onto the stone patio, squinting toward the street. 15 minutes from my office, he said. 3 from yours. Tessa joined him. The spring air was light with the scent of new blossoms and possibility. It's beautiful, she admitted. But... He turned to face her fully. It's not about generosity, Tessa. It's about doing what's right. The boys need space. And He hesitated. I need a place where they can be part of my life, not just visitors. She searched his face for a moment. You could buy them a palace. That's not the point. His voice was steady, measured true. She looked back toward the kitchen where sunbeams spilled across the floor like paint and said nothing. I'll take it, he told the agent, who beamed and excused herself. On the drive back to the apartment, the boys talked over one another with excitement. Can we get a trampoline? Dylan asked. Do we have to share rooms again? Levi asked. Can I draw on the walls? Finn whispered, hopeful. Absolutely not. Wyatt replied, but he was smiling. Tessa leaned her head against the window and let the chatter fill the silence between them. You're sure about this? She asked. He glanced at her. I've never been more sure of anything. That night, after the boys were asleep, 4 matching sets of pajamas, 4 snoring bundles under one roof. Wyatt stood in the kitchen beside Tessa, 2 mugs of tea between them. You realize this is a big step? She said. It's not just about the boys anymore. She turned to face him, her voice low. What is it about then? He hesitated, then said quietly, "It's about us. I don't want to just co-parent. I want to rebuild." Tessa stared at him, eyes searching. The silence between them was full of every mistake, every regret, every bit of love that had never quite died. "I'm not the same man I was," Wyatt said. "No," she replied, "you're not." He took her hand gently. "So, stay. Move in. Let's make this a real home." She looked down at their hands, then toward the hallway where the boys slept. "I'll think about it." He nodded, not pressing her. But as she turned off the kitchen light and let him kiss her hand before bed, Wyatt felt something warm unfurl in his chest. Not certainty, but hope. And for the first time in his life, he knew how to build something that couldn't be bought. The beach was quiet in the early evening. Waves murmured against the sand and the wind toyed gently with strands of seagrass along the dune fences. The sun hovered just above the horizon, painting the water in gold and fire. Wyatt sat on the back porch of the cottage, a mug of coffee cooling in his hands, watching 4 identical boys race barefoot along the shoreline. Their laughter was carried on the breeze, pure, loud, alive. Landon, the eldest, by a matter of minutes, had declared himself captain of the fort building a fortress out of driftwood. Levi meticulously traced wave patterns in the sand, recording them with a toy compass and notepad. Dylan was naturally trying to surf on a boogie board without water, and Finn sat on a rock nearby, sketchbook in his lap, the crashing sea mirrored in his pencil lines. "They're thriving," Tessa said, appearing beside Wyatt with her own coffee. She sank into the chair next to him, her sweater pulled tight against the breeze. He smiled. "They are thanks to you." She shook her head. "They needed their father. I just kept them steady until you arrived." Wyatt looked at her, the woman who had once been his everything, then his ghost, and now impossibly was both again. The storm was behind them. Kingston had folded under the weight of evidence. Harper had signed the NDA, returned most of the stolen money, and disappeared from the headlines. The media had moved on to newer scandals. The company, now under new leadership, was thriving. And the Carter Family Foundation, led by Tessa, had launched its first round of grants to single parents in need, helping people, just like she had once been. "You've built something incredible," Wyatt said, gesturing to her tablet where spreadsheets and project timelines glowed. She glanced at the screen, then at him. "So have you." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the boys tumble across the sand like waves themselves. "I've been thinking," Wyatt said at last, his voice quiet. "That sounds dangerous," Tessa teased. He smirked, then turned serious. "This place, it doesn't feel like a vacation house anymore. It feels like life." She didn't reply immediately, just sipped her coffee. "So what if we stayed?" he asked. "Not just the boys and me. All of us together. Full time." Tessa looked at him, and for a long, charged moment, Wyatt saw the weight of the past behind her eyes. Then she reached for his hand. "If we do this, it's not because we're pretending the past didn't happen. I know," he said. "It's because we believe the future can be different." He nodded. "Exactly." A pause. A breath. "Okay," she whispered. He squeezed her hand gently. "Okay." The boys barreled up the stairs a moment later, barefoot and laughing, Dylan tripping over his own excitement. "Mom, Dad, we saw a crab and it was huge," and Finn quietly held up a new drawing. The beach. The house, 4 small figures running in the sand and 2 taller ones hand in hand, watching from the porch. Wyatt took it carefully. "Is that us?" Finn nodded. "I just knew this is where we'd end up." Tessa met Wyatt's eyes and smiled soft, real and full of something too big for words. In that moment, surrounded by laughter, sand, and second chances, Wyatt Carter finally understood what real success was. It wasn't a company, it wasn't a title. It was this, a family, whole loved and finally, home. Their story may have ended, but the moment Wyatt chose love over legacy, did it stay with you? Tell us in the comments what touched you the most, and give this story a score from 0 to 10. We read every word. If you're new here, subscribe, and turn on the bell. More stories like this are just around the corner. And if your heart's ready for another emotional hit, tap the next video on your screen now. You won't regret it.